Mom, would you beg if you had no savings? My son laughed as he took my last dollar. I am 62 years old, and I thought I was prepared for retirement. But he took it all. The house, the savings, the retirement fund. He left me with nothing. Now I have to become the victim to catch the predator I raised. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 62 years old, a widow, and for the last decade, I've lived alone in a quiet suburban house in Riverton. It was a life I had built, a life I thought was secure. I had just returned from the grocery store, my car full of produce, when I realized I'd left my wallet on the kitchen counter. The ice cream would melt, but I couldn't pay for gas to get home without it. I parked the car back in the driveway and walked up the back path, annoyed at my own forgetfulness. I pushed the kitchen door open, stopping when it was just a crack. That's when I heard him, my only son, Caleb. He was in the living room, but his voice carried, sharp and clear. It was a voice I almost didn't recognize. It wasn't the warm tone he saved for me. This one was cold, metallic, and dripping with a cruel, casual amusement. He was on the phone. Then he laughed. It was a short, barking sound that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. "She won't have a cent left in the account," he said, and I heard the smile in his voice. "Seriously, Mum, would you beg if you had no savings? She'll have to if she wants to eat next week." I froze, my hand still on the doorknob. My blood ran cold, then hot. It had to be a joke, a sick, tasteless joke. But he kept talking. I listened, rooted to the linoleum, as he bragged to the person on the other end. He detailed how he had systematically drained every account I had: my retirement fund, the 40-year nest egg, my private savings, the money I kept separate, even the stocks from my old company, the ones my late husband Mark had insisted I never sell. All of it. Gone. Transferred. He boasted, into an account solely in his wife Vanessa's name. He mentioned names that meant nothing to me: Harbour Point Wealth Management, Silverline Ventures LLC. He spoke them like trophies, like inside jokes. But he was talking about my life, my security, my future. My knees gave out. I grabbed the doorframe, my knuckles white. The cheap plastic of the grocery bag still looped around my wrist, cutting into my skin. A wave of nausea and disbelief washed over me. Every maternal instinct screamed, demanding I burst in, confront him, demand he tell me this was a lie. But something else held me back. 35 years in human resources, in de-escalating conflicts and reading the subtle betrayals in people's faces, had taught me one thing when a predator is speaking: you do not interrupt. You listen. "I'm taking her to the bank tomorrow," Caleb continued, that chilling amusement still in his voice. "Going to tell her there's a system error we need to sort out." He paused, and I could picture the smirk. "I just want to see her face. I want to watch her when the teller tells her it's all zero." He wasn't just stealing from me. He was planning to savor my destruction. I pulled my hand back from the door, as slowly and silently as if I were defusing a bomb. I backed away, one step at a time, down the concrete porch steps. I felt like a thief, a trespasser in my own home, escaping through the back door. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely fit the key in my car's ignition. When did he get the passwords? The authorization? My mind was a blizzard of frantic, unanswered questions. I drove half a block down and parked under the shade of an old oak, my heart hammering against my ribs. I watched my house. Moments later, the front door opened. Caleb walked out, whistling, adjusting the cuffs on his expensive shirt. He got into his sleek new car, a car I now realized I had paid for, and pulled away with a smile of pure, self-satisfied triumph. He didn't even glance in my direction. In that moment, he wasn't my son. He was a stranger. The second his car turned the corner, the dam broke. A sob tore from my throat, raw and agonizing. I wept for the money, for the future I had lost, for the husband who had worked so hard to give it to me. But most of all, I wept for the boy I had raised, the son I had just watched murder his own mother's future. The tears streamed down my face, blurring the view of the quiet street. But as the sobs began to subside, something else rose in their place. It was cold, hard, and sharp. It was a resolve I hadn't felt in years. If he made me a victim, I would learn to be a hunter. I sat there in the car, the engine silent, replaying 30 years of my life in my head. I wasn't just some frail old woman. I was Eleanor Hayes, and I had spent nearly 4 decades as the Director of Human Resources at Brightpath Freight Systems. I managed multi-million-dollar payrolls, navigated complex labor laws, and signed off on retirement packages worth more than most people see in a lifetime. I was meticulous. I believed in rules, in procedure, and in the sanctity of a signature. My husband, Mark, and I had been a team. We saved diligently. The house in Riverton was paid off 20 years ago. Our retirement fund was solid, bolstered by those company stocks I'd held on to. We had a separate savings account, our independence fund, specifically so we would never, ever be a burden on our child. We wanted to be the parents who helped, not the parents who needed help. Then Mark died. A scaffolding collapse at a loading dock. It was sudden, brutal, and it left a hole in our lives that I tried to fill for Caleb. He was our only child, and after Mark was gone, my focus became singular. I was both mother and father, protector and provider. And I spoiled him. I see that now. I shielded him from the consequences of his own poor decisions. It started small. I still remember the sharp sting of betrayal when I found my credit card statement when he was 16, charged with hundreds of dollars in video games. I paid it. Then, when he was 25, he called me in tears, admitting he had maxed out 3 different credit cards and was facing collections. He had tens of thousands in debt. I paid that, too. I liquidated a portion of my own stocks, telling myself it was a lesson in youthful indiscretion. I was buying his recovery, blind to the fact I was funding his corruption. 2 years ago, Caleb met Vanessa. He was ecstatic, introducing her after a whirlwind romance that began at some financial startup seminar. She knows more about investing than my old finance professors. Mom, he'd gushed. She's brilliant. Vanessa was, I had to admit, impressive. She was polished, dressed in clothes that whispered wealth, not shouted it. She was articulate, sweet, and played the role of the perfect, caring daughter-in-law flawlessly. She listened to my stories about Mark. She brought me orchids, and she talked, constantly, about generational wealth and financial freedom for the whole family. Slowly, gently, she began to advise me. Why was my money sitting in 6 different accounts? It was inefficient. She suggested I consolidate. Put it all in one basket, she'd said, and we'll watch it for you. She recommended a firm called Harbor Point Wealth Management, which she claimed offered secure portfolios with yields that were, in her words, safe, but much higher than any bank. Caleb, she suggested, should be my authorized agent, just to make things easier for me. Then the pressure started, subtle at first, then more direct. Caleb began forwarding me news articles about bank failures and market volatility. "Mom, you need someone who can react quickly if the market turns," he'd urged, his voice filled with manufactured concern. "You need to give me full power of attorney, just for the financial accounts, so I can protect you." I remember the moment I signed the papers. We were at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with his homework. The stack of documents was thick, full of dense legal language. I hesitated, my pen hovering over the signature line. "This seems like a lot. Honey? Are you sure?" Caleb's face had tightened. The manufactured concern vanished, replaced by a flash of irritation so quick I almost missed it. "Mum, don't you trust me?" That was the bullet, the one that pierced 30 years of armor. How could I say no? How could I look my only son in the eyes and tell him I didn't trust him? Sitting in my car, staring at the empty street, I finally saw it. The casual credit card theft as a teen, the charm of Vanessa, the fear-mongering news articles, the praise, the sweet talk, and the reams of paper I had been too trusting to read closely. It wasn't a series of disconnected memories. It was the careful, meticulous construction of a cage, and my own son had just handed me the key. No, he hadn't handed it to me. He had locked me inside and thrown it away. I couldn't go home. Not yet. I couldn't face the walls of that house or the possibility that he might still be there, waiting for his performance tomorrow. Instead, I drove on autopilot, ending up in the sprawling, half-empty parking lot of the Riverton Mall, under the harsh orange glow of a security lamp. I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app Caleb had insisted on installing for me, the one I rarely ever touched. My hands were still shaking. I entered the password and waited. The screen loaded. My retirement account, the one that held over 30 years of my life's work, stared back at me. The balance was $942. A strangled sound escaped my throat. I tapped on the transaction history, page after page of massive withdrawals, enormous sums, transferred out over the last few weeks, all sent to a name I only recognized from Caleb's phone call, Silverline Ventures LLC, and in the authorization detail for every single transfer, Caleb Hayes. Panic, cold and acidic, rose in my chest. I fumbled through the app's menus, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I found another tab, credit lines. There was a new card, one I had never applied for, issued by the bank 3 months ago. It was in my name. The balance was already maxed out, a staggering sum spent at luxury car dealerships, high-end jewelry stores, and 5-star resorts in places I had never dreamed of visiting. He hadn't just taken what I had. He had stolen what I didn't have. He had buried me in debt. I couldn't breathe. I needed help. I dialed the only number I could think of. My fingers barely obeyed. It rang 3 times. "Eleanor, it's late. Are you okay?" Gloria Miller, my neighbor for 20 years, my closest friend, and a retired forensic accountant. "Gloria," I whispered, and my voice cracked. "He took it. He took everything." "Who took what, Eleanor?" "Slow down. Where are you?" "Caleb." I choked out. "The accounts, they're empty." He took it all. 10 minutes later, Gloria's sedan swung into the parking space next to mine. She wasn't just my friend. She was a force of nature. She got into my passenger seat carrying a battered leather briefcase and a laptop. "All right," she said, her voice the steel I needed. "Show me." My car became a makeshift war room. Gloria plugged my phone into her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. "Don't just panic, Eleanor. Think," she commanded, her tone pulling me back from the edge. "I need you to log into your email. We need to see every single piece of correspondence from the bank, from this Harbour Point place. Everything? Now." We scrolled through months of emails. Most were junk. But then Gloria stopped. This one. It was an email from Harbour Point Wealth Management, sent 6 weeks ago. The subject line was "Confirmation of Portfolio Strategy Update." It was a simple "I approve" message, seemingly from me, replying to a long chain of legal documents. But Gloria pointed to the header. It wasn't a new email. It was a forward, with my "I approve" typed above the line. "He logged in as you," Gloria said, her voice grim. "He forwarded the approval request to himself, added your consent, and sent it back to the firm. He's been building a paper trail to cover himself." She sat back, the dim dashboard lights illuminating the deep worry lines on her face. "Ellie, this is bad. Really bad. This isn't just a simple transfer. If he has power of attorney, and he's this brazen." She trailed off, looking at the credit card statement on the laptop screen. "I don't think he stopped with the cash. He might have taken out loans. He might have used your information for other things." A new, colder dread settled over me. "What other things?" Gloria looked at me, her eyes full of a terrible pity. "Eleanor, are you absolutely certain your house hasn't been touched?" The question hit me like a physical blow. The house, Mark's house, our home. It was paid off. It was safe. Wasn't it? I realized with a sickening lurch that I hadn't looked at my property records, not once, in over a year. I had just assumed. "We have to move fast," Gloria said, snapping her laptop shut. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., we go to the main branch of Riverton First Trust, not your local branch, the main one. We request hard copies of every single transaction, every signature card, every power of attorney document on file. Then we go to this Harbour Point office and do the same." I nodded, numb. She gathered her things, leaving me with a stack of bank statements she had printed from a portable printer in her bag. "Go home," she ordered. "Act normal. You're tired. You had a headache. Do not let him know you know anything. Not one word. Eleanor. You understand." I understood. I drove home, the printed out evidence of my ruin hidden under the passenger seat. I walked in the back door, just as I had planned to hours earlier. Caleb was on the sofa, watching TV, Vanessa beside him. "Hey, Mum?" he called out, not looking away from the screen. "You were gone a long time. Everything okay?" I leaned against the doorframe, forcing a weary sigh. "Just tired, honey. The lines at the market were endless. I think I'm just going to go straight to bed." "Okay," he said, his voice casual, dismissive. "See you in the morning. Remember we have to stop by the bank." "I remember," I said, my voice quiet. I walked past the living room, past the son who had just planned my execution, and locked my bedroom door behind me, clutching the papers Gloria had printed. The hunt had begun. The next morning, I dressed in my best navy blue suit. The one I used to wear to board meetings. I put on makeup, styled my hair, and looked every inch the competent, sharp-minded executive I had been for 30 years. Gloria met me at my car, dressed in an equally severe grey suit, her briefcase in hand. We looked like two women going to war, because we were. We arrived at the Riverton First Trust main branch at exactly 9 o'clock. I had told Caleb I had an early doctor's appointment and would meet him at the bank later. A lie that came surprisingly easy. Brent Lawson had been a junior teller when I first opened my accounts. Now he was the branch manager. He greeted me with a warm, practiced smile. "Eleanor, good to see you. What can we do for you?" "Caleb mentioned you'd be stopping by to sort out a little system glitch." I played the part. "Yes, Brent. Thank you for seeing us. This is my financial advisor, Gloria Miller." Gloria nodded curtly, not offering a smile. "I'm just a little worried about some strange notifications I saw, and my son has been so busy, I didn't want to bother him." Brent's smile remained. Of course. Come on back." The moment the heavy office door clicked shut, the act dropped. I sat down, placed my hands flat on his desk, and pushed the stack of printed statements Gloria had given me across the polished wood. "I want you to explain," I said, my voice low and level, "why my retirement account is empty, and who authorized these transfers to Silverline Ventures LLC. Brent's smile faltered. He looked at the papers, then at me, a flash of annoyance replacing his practiced warmth. "Eleanor, I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." "It is not a misunderstanding," Gloria cut in. "We want a full accounting, right now." Flustered, Brent turned to his terminal. "Let me just pull up your file." He typed, the silence in the room broken only by the click of the keys. His brow furrowed. He scrolled. He clicked. And then he went very still. "Well," he said, clearing his throat, "I see the transfers you're referring to, authorized by your son under the power of attorney we have on file. But that's not. Eleanor, what's going on?" "That's what I'm asking you," I said. He turned the monitor toward me. The Silverline Ventures transfers were all there, but beneath them was a larger, more terrifying entry. A loan. "This," he said, pointing, "is the reverse mortgage you took out against your house 9 months ago." Gloria's question from last night echoed in my ears. "I did no such thing." Brent looked deeply uncomfortable. He clicked again and printed a document. "I'm afraid you did. Eleanor. Here is the contract. That's your signature." He slid the paper to me, and there it was. My name. Eleanor Hayes. Signed in a flawless imitation of my own cursive. It was so good. It was terrifying. The contract stipulated a large, lump sum payout, followed by monthly installments. The recipient account listed was not mine. It was a corporate account for a company I'd never heard of, a company whose director was listed as Caleb Hayes. "I want a copy of the original," Gloria demanded, her voice sharp. Every single page, especially the notary and witness page. Brent, now pale, went to a file cabinet and returned with a thick folder. Gloria snatched the pages and scanned them. "Who is this?" she asked, tapping a name on the witness line. "That's one of our newer tellers," Brent said. "She's very helpful. She even makes house calls for our priority clients. Like you." I remembered her. A sweet-faced girl who had come to my house twice to drop off paperwork and check in. Vanessa had been there both times, serving tea. Mr. Lawson, Brent started, his tone shifting from helpful to condescending. These are legally binding documents. The procedures were all followed. Perhaps you just forgot you signed them. It happens. He said it. The word, the implication, that I was old, confused, senile. Something in me snapped. The 30 years of HR training took over. Mr. Lawson, I said, and my voice was so cold, so sharp, it made him flinch. On April 14th, the date of that signature, I was not at home. I was, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., at a deposition for a wrongful termination suit against my former company, Bright Path Freight Systems. I can provide the names of the 5 attorneys present. Following that, I had lunch with my friend Gloria here. Your teller, who claims I signed this in her presence, is lying. Brent's face went white. He realized he was not talking to a confused old woman. Gloria's phone was on the desk, its screen dark. But I knew her. It was recording. "Brent?" she said, her voice deceptively gentle. "Who benefits from this? Why would your bank push through a reverse mortgage on a paid-off home for a client with millions in assets?" Brent stammered. He looked at the door. "Look, this is... Caleb Hayes is a VIP client. He brings in a lot of business. There was pressure from corporate to fast-track his family's files. So you fast-tracked my ruin," I said. We left with copies of everything, leaving a terrified Brent Lawson in our wake. Our next stop was the sterile, glass-walled office of Harbour Point Wealth Management. A slick young advisor named Dylan met us, all white teeth and expensive cologne. He tried to feed us a line about unprecedented market volatility and aggressive portfolio rebalancing. "Where is the money, Mr. Dylan?" I asked, cutting through his script. He couldn't answer. He couldn't explain why rebalancing meant liquidating my entire portfolio and wiring it to a single, unaudited shell company in Delaware. He couldn't explain why that company was owned by Caleb and Vanessa Hayes. We walked out of the sterile office and into the harsh afternoon sunlight. I felt sick. It wasn't just Caleb. It was the bank manager who looked the other way. It was the advisor who collected his commission. It was an entire system built to look polite while it strips you bare. "They're all in on it," I whispered to Gloria. "Yes," she said. "They think I'm too old to fight." "Yes," she said again. A cold, clear thought settled in my mind. "If I can't trust the system," I said, "I'll have to use their own rules against them." Gloria didn't take me home. She drove me straight to a steel and glass building downtown, to the offices of Cole and Winters. Marcia Cole was nothing like the men I had dealt with at the bank. She was in her 50s, with an aura of focused, impatient intelligence. Her office was sparse, her desk clear. She specialized, Gloria had told me, in pulling the elderly back from the financial graves their families had dug for them. I told her everything. The overheard phone call, the power of attorney, Brent Lawson's terrified confession at the bank, the forged reverse mortgage, the Harbour Point runaround. I spoke for nearly an hour, Gloria chiming in to clarify details from the statements. When I finished, Marcia didn't offer sympathy. She leaned forward, her fingers steepled. "Mrs. Hayes, I need you to understand your position. You are at a severe disadvantage." I felt my old HR confidence stiffen. "But I have the statements. I have Brent's admission on tape." "You have a power of attorney you signed willingly," Marcia countered, her voice sharp but not unkind. You have a signature on a reverse mortgage that the bank's own staff witnessed, even if fraudulently. Their lawyers will argue you simply regret giving your son a gift. They will paint you as confused and fickle. It's called donor's remorse, and it's their favorite defense. She let that sink in before delivering the real blow. But that is not your biggest threat. Your biggest threat, Mrs. Hayes, is that the moment they suspect you're fighting back, Caleb and Vanessa will petition the court for conservatorship. Guardianship, Gloria whispered, her face pale. Exactly, Marcia said. They will walk into court and say, "Look at our poor, confused mother. She's paranoid. She's delusional. She's accusing her only son of stealing from her." They will use your own accusations as proof of your cognitive decline. They will say you're a danger to your own financial well-being, and they need to take control to protect you. The air left my lungs. It was the scenario from my darkest nightmares. To be legally caged by my own son, to be declared incompetent, a child in the eyes of the law, forced to watch as he and Vanessa smiled politely while liquidating the last of my life, to have to ask them for money, for permission, to be silenced. "So," Marcia said, her voice snapping me back, "we make sure that never happens. We have 3 immediate objectives." She held up a finger. "First, you are going to get an independent neuropsychological evaluation. Today, I'm scheduling it. We need a baseline report from a certified expert stating, unequivocally, that you are of sound mind. That report becomes our shield." She held up a second. "Second, you will buy a legal ledger and a pen. You will document everything. The day you heard the call, the time you met with Brent, every interaction with Caleb and Vanessa, no matter how small, dates, times, quotes. Your trauma is now evidence. You will turn your pain into a timeline." "Third," she said, leaning in, "and this is the hardest part. You do not, under any circumstances, confront them. You go home. You continue to be the loving, slightly dotty mother. You tell Caleb you're still confused about the bank error. You encourage him to explain it to you. You ask Vanessa for help understanding the new investments." I was confused. "Why would I?" "Because," Marcia said, "you are going to secretly record every single one of those conversations. We need them to hang themselves with their own words." The thought of it made me ill. To guy, to trap, my own son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike. A wave of profound, maternal guilt washed over me. I had failed him somehow, raised a monster, and now I was going to put him in a cage. But as quickly as the guilt surfaced, the memory came right after. That cold, barking laugh I'd heard through the kitchen door. In the end, she'll beg too. The image of his satisfied smirk as he drove off in a car I had paid for. My spine stiffened. The boy I had loved was gone, or at least buried so deep beneath this greedy stranger that I could no longer reach him. "Good," Marcia said, as if she could see the decision settling into place on my face. "There's one more thing. This Vanessa, she's too practiced at this. This isn't her first time. If we can find other victims, other families she's latched onto, this stops being a messy family dispute and becomes what it truly is, a pattern of systemic, predatory fraud." Marcia slid a single document across the desk. A client services agreement? A retainer? I looked at the signature line. I thought about the stack of papers Caleb had pushed in front of me at my kitchen table. The papers I'd signed out of trust and guilt. I thought of the reverse mortgage I hadn't signed, the one that had stolen my home. I picked up Marcia's pen. My hand was perfectly steady. I signed my name, Eleanor Hayes, in clear, firm script. It was, I realized, the first document I had signed in my entire life that was not for my husband, not for my company, and not for my son. It was just for me. The neuropsych evaluation was grueling, but I passed with flying colours. While I was busy proving I wasn't crazy, Gloria was doing what she did best, digging. Armed with her accounting skills and a deep familiarity with public records databases, she spent 2 solid days camped in my dining room, fueled by coffee and a quiet rage. She wasn't just looking at Silverline Ventures. She was looking at Vanessa. On the 3rd day, she called me over to her laptop. I found her. "Ellie," she said, her voice grim. Or at least, who she used to be. Our Vanessa wasn't always a Hayes. In Arizona, about 5 years ago, she was Vanessa Hart. Gloria clicked a link. It was a small, local news article from a town outside Phoenix. The headline was vague, "Local family hit by investment fraud." But the article detailed a scheme targeting the elderly, and the primary victim listed was a woman named Joanne Mercer, the mother of Vanessa Hart's now ex-husband. Marcia Cole's legal aid network was wide. It took her less than 24 hours to track Joanne Mercer to a small apartment in a neighbouring state. Marcia made the initial call. At first, Joanne refused to speak. Marcia relayed, deeply ashamed. "I let my own son trick me," she had said, her voice heavy with a shame I knew all too well. But then Marcia told her my story. She told her about Caleb, about Harbour Point, about a shell company named Silverline Ventures. Joanne agreed to meet. We met her at a sterile, fluorescent-lit truck stop diner halfway between our cities. Joanne was a small, bird-like woman who looked 10 years older than her actual age. Her hands trembled as she clutched her coffee cup. She had brought a worn cardboard banker's box with her. Her story poured out of her, hesitant at first, then gaining a terrible momentum. Vanessa had been the same charming, brilliant, full of talk about financial security. She had convinced her husband, Joanne's son, to set up a small company. She had then convinced Joanne to invest her retirement savings into it, promising high, secure returns. Then, one day, they were gone. Vanessa, her son, and all the money. A month later, the foreclosure notice arrived. Vanessa had, through her son, also taken out a mortgage on Joanne's paid-off home. "She left me with nothing," Joanne whispered, her eyes fixed on the tabletop. Gloria gently pulled the box toward us. Inside was a collection of old files, held together by brittle rubber bands, emails, bank statements, contracts, and my blood ran cold. The language in the emails, the promises of high returns, the structure of the transfers, it was identical. And there, on a letterhead for a company called Desert Ridge Holdings, was a corporate logo that was almost exactly the same as the one I'd seen for Silverline Ventures. It was a template, a practiced, polished script for financial murder. Then Joanne said the words that stopped my heart. My son, David. He wasn't strong. Vanessa. She consumed him. She explained that after Vanessa disappeared, leaving him with a mountain of legal trouble, he had spiraled. "He died," she said, her voice breaking for the first time. "An overdose. The police found him in his apartment. He left me an email." She fumbled in her purse and pulled out a folded, worn piece of paper. It was the email, printed out. In it, her son confessed everything. How Vanessa had planned it all. How he had used his mother's name to sign for the loans. How she had promised him the world and then left him to take the fall. Marcia, who had driven out with us, read the email and nodded slowly, her face like stone. "This is the pattern," she said, her voice quiet but vibrating with intensity. "This is what we needed. She is the principal. She finds a weak son, a man she can control, and uses him as a key to unlock his mother's assets." I looked at Joanne, at the printed email, at the identical contracts. I felt a wave of nausea, but also a terrifying clarity. Caleb was walking the exact same path as David Mercer. The only difference was that my son wasn't dead. Not physically. Anyway. Joanne looked up, her tear-filled eyes meeting mine. "When she took my money," she said, "I was too ashamed to fight, too broken. I let her win. But she didn't just take my house. She took my son." She reached across the table and placed her trembling hand on mine. "I'm not going to be silent this time," she said, her voice, for the first time, strong. "I will be a witness. I'll give you everything. I will stand up in that courtroom, and I will tell them exactly what she is." We left the diner and stood for a moment in the vast, windy parking lot, surrounded by the rumble of idling trucks. 3 women, 3 mothers, all of us betrayed by the very people we were supposed to be able to trust. Gloria, the protector, Joanne, the survivor, and me, the one who was about to fight back. We didn't say it aloud, but we all knew. We were going to burn Vanessa Hart to the ground. I went home with a script. Marcia's plan was my new role, and I, the former HR director, was preparing for the performance of my life. I had to unlearn a lifetime of competence and instead become the woman they already believed me to be: frail, forgetful, and fading. I started small. I accidentally misread my utility bill, calling Caleb in a fluster. I forgot which day the trash was collected. Then, I made the real call. "Caleb? Honey?" I pitched my voice a little higher, a little weaker. "I'm just so terribly confused. I was trying to... well, I wanted to get a little cash, just to have in the house. You know, and the bank machine said... well, it just said no. I must be doing something wrong." A sigh of impatience from his end. "Mum, we talked about this. It's all in the new investment. It's working for you." "Oh, I know, dear. I know," I said quickly. "You and Vanessa are so smart, but I just don't understand it. Could you and Vanessa come for dinner? Maybe you could just explain the paperwork to me again? Your silly old mother just can't keep track." He agreed, the relief in his voice palpable. A simple dinner was easier than a scene at the bank. They arrived 2 nights later. They walked into my house, my home, like conquering heroes. Vanessa was wearing a new silk dress and shoes I knew cost well over $1,000. Caleb wore a watch that glinted under my dining room lights, a model I'd seen in magazines that cost more than my first car. The scent of their expensive perfume and cologne, bought with my retirement, filled the air. As I served the roast chicken, one I'd paid for with the small cash reserve Gloria had pressed on me, I began. My phone was on the kitchen counter, set to record, its microphone angled toward the table. Across the yard, in Gloria's dark living room, A small, high-powered camera she'd borrowed from a private investigator was aimed through my window, capturing it all. "I just feel so silly," I said, pushing my food around. "That nice Mr. Lawson at the bank tried to explain it. This reverse thing with the house. It sounds like the house is paying me a salary." Caleb rolled his eyes. "Mum, it's just a financial tool. It unlocks equity." "But equity in my house, I thought it was paid for." Vanessa cut in, her voice like warm honey. "Eleanor, think of it like your house was just a lazy employee, sitting there doing nothing. We just gave it a job. Now it's earning for you." "Oh," I said, widening my eyes. "And this? Silverline Ventures." "That's the job." "Exactly," Vanessa said, smiling. "It's the company that manages the asset." "So, you two own that company, right?" I asked, all innocence. Caleb's fork clattered. "Mum, you're getting confused again. We just manage it. For you." He was getting angry, which is what I wanted. Vanessa, however, saw the danger. She needed to re-establish control. I set the trap. "Well, it's all just so complicated." I sighed, looking down. "It's probably for the best. I'm no good with these things." I paused, then looked up, as if a new thought had just struck me. "You know, I still have that old safe deposit box at the Riverton Community Bank. The small one. It just has some of your father's old things, and some cash I'd put aside. And, oh, my mother's jewelry." I saw the flicker, a tiny, almost imperceptible tightening in Vanessa's eyes. "Greed." "I suppose," I said. "That jewelry is just sitting there, like a lazy employee. I'll bet Vanessa would know how to make it. What was it? Optimize." Vanessa cackled, a sharp, ugly sound masked by a polite smile. "Well, Eleanor, dead assets don't do anyone any good. We could certainly look at having those appraised. Maybe we should add my name to the box, just to help you manage it. We'd hate for you to go alone and get confused. We just have to make sure Mum doesn't go pulling things out on her own," Caleb added, joining in. "Oh, I wouldn't dream of it," I said. "You're both so much smarter about this. I'm just so glad I signed that paper for you." "Caleb? That power of attorney?" Caleb laughed. He was full of my chicken, full of my wine, full of himself. "Mum, please. Even if you hadn't signed, we would have found a way. We always do. Remember that reverse mortgage? You were in another state, and we still got it done." He laughed again. It was the laugh, the same cold, barking laugh I had heard through the kitchen door. I let the silence hang. Then I looked at him, my son. I let my eyes fill with genuine tears, channeling the real pain, the real heartbreak. "Caleb," I whispered, my voice trembling. "If it really was all gone, if I had nothing, would you make me beg?" I asked the question he had already answered. I just needed him to say it to my face. He looked at me, his smile fading, replaced by that cold, chilling amusement. He leaned forward, as if sharing a joke. "Mom," he said, half laughing, "you could beg. But by that point, who would be left to give you anything?" He winked, picked up his fork, and took another bite of my chicken. He didn't know it, but he had just signed his own confession. Every syllable, every cruel chuckle, was now stored permanently on my phone and on Gloria's camera. The performance at dinner was only the beginning. The real counterattack arrived 4 days later, not as a phone call, but as a sharp knock on my front door. A uniformed process server handed me a thick manila envelope and asked me to confirm my name. I took it, my hands steady, and shut the door. Inside, bearing the official seal of the Riverton County Court, was a petition. Caleb had filed for an emergency conservatorship. I read the words, and the floor seemed to drop out from under me. He was petitioning to become my legal guardian, to take control of my person and my estate. The reason, he alleged, was my rapid cognitive decline and severe paranoid delusions. He claimed I was making dangerous and irrational decisions and was no longer competent to manage my own affairs. It was Marsha's prediction, come true with terrifying speed. But the worst part was the attachments. Stapled to the back were 2 medical reports from a psychiatrist I had never met. A Dr. Lowell. His notes, supposedly from 2 different consultations, described me as forgetful, agitated, and prone to fantasy. He wrote that I suffered from unfounded suspicions that my son, who was clearly a concerned caregiver, was stealing from me. I had never laid eyes on this man in my life. I was in Marsha Cole's office within the hour. She read the petition, her expression hardening. When she got to Dr. Lowell's name, a sharp, humorless sound escaped her. "Lowell," she said, tapping the signature. "Of course. He's a signature for hire. He's been sanctioned in 2 other states for providing false evaluations in conservatorship for profit schemes. They're sloppy, and they're arrogant." She was already on her computer, pulling his disciplinary records. "Sloppy or not, they're fast," she said, pointing to the summons. "The hearing is in 3 weeks. That's a shockingly short timeline. They're trying to railroad this, to get a judge to rubber stamp it before we can fight back." She looked at me, her eyes drilling into mine. "This means you cannot break character, not for 1 second. You are still the confused, loving mother. If they suspect you are this organized, they'll move the money where we can never find it." The pressure mounted. It wasn't just from Caleb. The system he had weaponized began to close ranks. Within the same week, 2 more letters arrived, this time from the white shoe law firms representing Riverton First Trust and Harbour Point. They were worded politely, but the threat was clear. They were aware of my unfortunate confusion and baseless allegations. If I continued to slander their institutions or their valued client, Mr. Caleb Hayes, they would be forced to pursue all legal remedies. I stopped sleeping. The nights were a long, dark terror. I would sit in my kitchen, staring into the blackness, haunted by the image of a judge banging a gavel and declaring me incompetent. The idea of my son having legal power over my body, my life, my very right to speak it, was more terrifying than being penniless. And beneath the fear, a crushing guilt gnawed at me. I had raised this, my love, my protection, my refusal to let him fail, had forged the man who was now trying to erase me. Gloria and Joanne refused to leave me alone. They took turns staying in my guest room, turning my house into a fortress of support. They became my trainers. Every night, they would sit me at the dining room table, the scene of my last recording, and drill me. They played the role of Caleb's lawyer. "Mrs. Hayes, isn't it true you forgot where you put your keys? Mrs. Hayes, can you tell the court the date of your own husband's death without checking?" They were relentless, forcing me to build a spine of steel, to answer not with emotional panic, but with cold, hard facts. It was during one of these sessions that Marsha laid out her final, most dangerous plan. We're ready to defend against the conservatorship, she said. We have your neuropsych report. We have the recordings. We have Joanne. We will win. She paused. But that's defense. I'm suggesting offense. I'm suggesting we file a countersuit. My stomach clenched. Against Caleb. Against all of them, Marcia said, her voice flat. We file a counterclaim accusing Caleb and Vanessa of abuse of power of attorney, felony forgery, and conspiracy to commit organized fraud. We name Harbour Point and the bank as co-conspirators who failed in their fiduciary duty. We are not just asking for your money back. Eleanor, we are asking the judge to refer this entire case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. Criminal. The word hung in the air. Prison. For Caleb, the boy I had bandaged and sung to sleep. He could go to jail for years, I whispered, the words tasting like acid. I hesitated. The mother in me, the one who had paid off his credit cards, the one who had always protected him, screamed in protest. And then, as vividly as if he were sitting right in front of me, I heard the laugh. That cold, dismissive chuckle. You can beg, but by then there'll be no one left to save you. The memory hit me like a splash of icy water. The mother in me went quiet, and the woman he had tried to break rose to her feet. I looked at Marcia. Do it. She had the documents prepared. A stack of paper 50 pages thick, a precise, brutal timeline of my own betrayal. I picked up the pen. I thought of the last time I'd signed a legal document, at this very table, with Caleb's expectant, demanding face watching me. That signature had been an act of submission. This one was an act of war. I signed my name, Eleanor Hayes, and in that moment, I stopped being the protector. I became the plaintiff. The machine of justice, once started, began to grind with its own momentum. A week before the hearing, the first crack appeared in their armor. Marcia called me, her voice clipped and excited. We just got a gift, she said. An anonymous email had been sent to her firm's general inbox. It was short, cryptic, but the attachment was a spreadsheet. It contained routing numbers and account details for an offshore entity, a bank in the Caymans, registered to Silverline Ventures LLC, with Vanessa Hayes listed as the sole director. Even more, it showed a pattern of transfers from other states, other shell companies. Gloria, energized, traced the email's IP address. Public Library, Phoenix, Arizona? She announced, spinning around from my dining room table. Right in the middle of the city where Vanessa Hart used to operate. It was either another victim, one with resources, or an old partner she had double-crossed. Either way, they were bleeding allies. The second crack came the same day. The phone rang, and it was Joanne Mercer. Her voice was thin and shaking, but not with fear. With adrenaline. Eleanor, she said, her voice breathy. I was finally going through David's old things, the boxes I've had in storage. I found, under a stack of textbooks, I found a USB drive. We sat in Marcia's office the next morning, listening. The audio quality was poor, but the voices were clear. It was Vanessa, years younger, her tone sharp and coaching. We heard her, in her old life, instructing Joanne's son. They're old, David. Her voice echoed from the small speakers. They want us to tell them what to do. You just get the power of attorney, get them to sign. And then, the line that connected her past to my present. Don't worry about the logistics. My guy at Harbour Point, Dylan, he'll handle the asset transfer. He knows the drill. He's very accommodating. Dylan, the slick young man who had blamed market volatility for my empty accounts. He wasn't just an advisor. He was part of the template. Marcia didn't wait. She spent the entire night filing emergency motions, attaching the email, the USB's contents, and Joanne's affidavit. She obtained court orders to seal the evidence and, crucially, to preserve all server records from Riverton First Trust and Harbour Point. They can't shred it now, she said, a rare, thin smile on her face. They're locked in. The night before the hearing, the quiet in my house was so thick I could barely breathe. I was checking my suit for the third time when the phone rang. An unknown number. I answered, my heart pounding. Mrs. Hayes. The voice was a reedy, terrified whisper. It's Brent. Brent Lawson. From the bank. He sounded like a man on a ledge. I can't do it. They're lawyers. They made me sign a statement, a false affidavit. They said it was just procedure, to protect the bank. That you were confused. He was rambling, his words tumbling out. But they're going to put me on the stand tomorrow. I'm not going to perjure myself for them. I'm not losing my license over Caleb Hayes. What are you going to do? Brent, I asked, my voice calm, cold. I'm going to tell the truth. He choked out. I'm going to tell them about the pressure from corporate to service the VIP client. I'm going to tell them I processed the mortgage without you present. And, Mrs. Hayes, I'm bringing the internal security footage, the camera from my desk, from that day. It shows Caleb. It shows his wife. It doesn't show you, because you were never there. I hung up and immediately called Marcia, but she had news of her own, and it was grim. I just got a tip, she said, her voice all business. Dylan has vanished. The advisor from Harbour Point. He didn't show up for his deposition. His apartment is empty. It looks like he fled. I sat down heavily. What does that mean? It means, Marcia said, that the liquid cash he was managing in that offshore account is probably gone with him. We can win. Eleanor. We can get the house back. We can void the debts. But the money, we may never recover all of it. It was a cold, hard dose of reality. I could win the war and still lose the fortune. I looked at the kitchen table, at the empty chairs. It was no longer about the money. It was about the fact that they had planned to make me beg for it. Gloria and Joanne arrived an hour later, as planned. My small kitchen, the scene of the crime, became our final rehearsal stage. The three of us sat around the table. Gloria held a yellow legal pad, her face set in the stern mask of a judge. Joanne, her hands steady, held her own notes, playing the part of Caleb's aggressive attorney. Mrs. Hayes, why did you sign the power of attorney if you didn't trust your son? Joanne snapped. I did trust him, I answered, my voice clear. That is the crime. Mrs. Hayes, aren't you just a bitter old woman who regrets being generous? Gloria asked, her eyes boring into me. I am not bitter, I said, looking from her to Joanne. I am not confused, and I am not a victim. I am a witness, and I am ready. The Riverton County Courthouse was a circus. The hearing room, normally quiet, was packed. I saw suits from Riverton First Trust and Harbour Point huddled in the back. Local press, smelling blood, lined the pews. Caleb and Vanessa walked in, looking tense, but still trying to project that infuriating confidence. Their lawyer, a man with a shark's smile, began. He painted me as a delusional, paranoid old woman, poisoned by bitter friends. Caleb's petition, he argued, was not an attack, but the painful, responsible action of a loving son trying to protect his mother from herself. Marcia stood up. Her voice was calm and cut through the room. Your Honor, before we address the petitioner's fantasies, let's establish reality. She submitted my neuropsychological evaluation, certified by one of the state's top gerontologists. The report concludes Mrs. Hayes is not just competent, but possesses superior-level cognitive function. When Caleb's lawyer tried to introduce Dr. Lowell's reports, Marcia was ready. Objection. We submit the disciplinary record of Dr. Lowell from the medical boards of 2 separate states, showing a pattern of providing fraudulent diagnoses in conservatorship cases. The judge's face went cold. He struck Lowell's evidence from the record. I saw the first crack in Caleb's composure. The prosecution calls Brent Lawson. Brent walked to the stand, shaking, looking pale. He told the truth. He spoke of the internal pressure to service the VIP Hayes account. He confessed, his voice cracking, that he had authorized the reverse mortgage based on the power of attorney, even though I was not present at the signing. But, Marcia said, you do have a record of who was present, correct? She signaled for the AV screen. The courtroom watched the silent, grainy footage from Brent's desk. It showed Caleb, leaning over the desk. It showed Vanessa, wearing a large hat, signing page after page. It did not show me. Now, let's talk about that power of attorney. Marcia continued. Let's hear what the petitioners intended to do with it. She played the audio from the dinner party, the room filled with the clinking of my silverware, and then Vanessa's honeyed voice talking about my jewelry as dead assets. Then, Caleb's laugh, his voice clear and chilling. Even if you hadn't signed, we would have found a way, like that reverse mortgage. The room was dead silent. The defense calls Joanne Mercer. Joanne walked to the stand, small but straight-backed. She told her story, the identical scheme, the identical corporate templates, the son who died. And then she presented the USB drive. Marcia played one more clip. Vanessa's voice, younger, sharper. They're just stupid old people. My guy at Harbour Point, Dylan. He knows the drill. The judge held up a hand. That's enough. He looked at the offshore accounts, the email from Phoenix, Joanne's testimony. This, he announced, his voice booming, has moved far beyond a petition for conservatorship. This is a clear and disturbing pattern of organized, predatory fraud targeting the elderly. Caleb's lawyer, desperate, tried one last time. Your Honor, my client was manipulated. He, too, is a victim of Vanessa Hart. Marcia didn't even smile. A final recording, Your Honor. She played the first recording, the one I took from outside my kitchen door. Caleb, bragging to an unknown friend. She won't have a cent. I want to see her face when the teller tells her it's all zero. The image of the loving son evaporated. The judge's decision was swift and brutal. The petition for conservatorship was denied with extreme prejudice. My full authority was restored. Every contract, every power of attorney, every single signature obtained fraudulently was declared null and void. And finally, he referred the entire case, Caleb, Vanessa, Dr. Lowell, and the absent Dylan to the district attorney's office for immediate criminal investigation. 2 bailiffs moved toward them. Vanessa was silent, her face a mask of rage. But Caleb looked broken. As they led him out in handcuffs, he turned and looked at me. His eyes were streaming. "Mum," he whispered. "Mum, I'm sorry." I just shook my head. I stood up, feeling every eye on me, and said, my voice quiet but heard by everyone, "You asked me if I would beg if I had nothing. I chose to stand, even with nothing, rather than kneel before you." After, Marcia explained the finances. Because she had filed the countersuit so quickly, the courts had frozen most of the accounts. The house was safe. The mortgage was gone. The money Dylan ran off with would be a separate civil suit. But I had gotten most of my life back. I walked out of the courthouse into the late afternoon sun. Gloria on one side, Joanne on the other. We were 3 women who had been made to feel ashamed, and we weren't ashamed anymore. That night, I returned to my home, my safe, quiet home. I walked into the living room, the spot where I had heard the call that started it all. I took a deep breath. He had taken my money, but he hadn't taken this. I sat at my kitchen table, opened a new notebook, and wrote the first line. "If your son asks if you will beg when you are empty, remember that you always, always have the right to say no and to stand up and walk right out of his life." Thank you all so much for listening to my story. I'm really curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and if it moved you, please hit that hype button so more people can hear it.